Good evening. This is Heartstock Radio. I'm your host, Carol Murphy, and Clark Grant is in the studio. Today, our guest is Donika Markegard of Markegard Family Grass-Fed Beef. In just a moment, Doniga will be with us and tell us all about what she has going on. And also, I'd like to remind you that we are on Facebook. You can always email us at heartstockradio@gmail.com. In just a moment, Doniga will be with us. This is Heartstock. Thanks for listening.
As I went walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that in the skyway I saw below me that golden valley.
Hello, this is Heartstock Radio. I'm your host, Carol Murphy, and today our guest is Donika Markegard of Markegard Family Grass-Fed Beef. Hi, Doniga. How are you?
I'm doing good this morning.
Thank you so much for being on Heartstock and sharing your story with us. It's pretty amazing.
Thank you for having me.
So, I found you by way of the documentary Kiss the Ground. And having way back, probably 3 lifetimes ago, I was an ag major in the field of animal science and ag business. And I was just overjoyed by this documentary. I'm hoping that we can start out with just a quick intro for our listeners who maybe haven't seen the documentary and don't really know anything about your family business. Can you share a little intro, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are regenerative ranchers out in coastal California, and we graze cattle. We raise grass-fed beef, grass-fed lamb, pasture-raised pork, and pasture-raised chicken, spanning about 10,000 acres on coastal hills, both north and south of San Francisco. So our family ranches in a way that mimics nature, so mimics the natural cycles which evolved with these grasslands. And we actually have incredibly productive grasslands here in California, those that have not been developed or fragmented, and they're the most biodiverse in terms of plant species in the whole country. So it really is an incredible climate. And we have really rich perennial native bunch grasses where our cattle graze. And we also have great access to markets. So my background, though, is in wildlife tracking and nature connection. So I'm really looking at this type of agriculture as a way that enhances nature, enhances species. We work with the Audubon Society to document grassland birds, and we also work with other soil scientists to measure the carbon sequestration on grasslands. So it's sort of an exciting time to be a regenerative rancher right now. And the movie Kiss the Ground really highlighted a number of different ranches across the country and across the world that are doing these practices and having really incredible results.
Indeed. So did you grow up in the Bay Area? Where are you from?
I'm from Washington State, so a rural area where my family, we grew our own food, and my mother always raised us pretty close to the land. And my husband grew up ranching in the Bay Area.
You know, that's fascinating because most of us here in Montana, we don't think of California as big ag land, but that is, I think the 2 largest ag producing counties in the whole United States are in California.
Yeah, and most of that is produce. So the majority of the produce that's shipped across the country and across the world is right here in that sort of the Central Valley in California. So we're on what you would call, say, what's sort of classified as the marginal land. So we graze on lands that can't be tilled for a row crop. So and any land that's fertile and arable is definitely utilized for those higher value crops like strawberries in California.
Yeah, and there's so much talk and misinformation about specifically meat crops and using animals in a regenerative way, because, you hear all the time that we shouldn't eat beef because it's contributing to global warming. So I'm hoping we can talk a lot about the environmental benefits of what you're doing and some of the misconceptions about what you're doing. And before we do that, I'm just wondering a little bit more, where you went to school and really how this all evolved and came to fruition.
Yeah. So I was a little bit of a misfit rebel child, and I ran away from home at a pretty young age as a teenager. And then I found my way back through synchronicity back to my hometown, and where there was a wilderness school, the Wilderness Awareness School. So at the time, it was a full-time immersion for high school students. And there was just a handful of us. It was just getting going. It was sort of like a pilot of what happens when you take kids that sort of don't fit in any other school or any other setting and just immerse them in the wilderness, mentor them in bird language, wilderness survival, indigenous knowledge, and see what happens. And so I write about this extensively in my book, Dawn Again, Tracking the Wisdom of the Wild. And also there's a young adult version called Wolf Girl. And so I write about this a lot, how when we connect to nature, we're connecting also to ourselves and our intuition and finding that curiosity that we all have, which leads to passion and then leads to vision. So essentially what happened while I was in this school, and I sort of document this in my book, is that passion of connecting with nature and working to sort of heal what the destruction humans have caused led me then to permaculture, which brought me to California, because at the time that's sort of where some of the leading permaculture work was happening. And then I met my husband, who was a next door neighbor. And he's a 6th generation cattle rancher. And I came across holistic management. And from there, I saw that big impact that I could make was to work with grasslands and work with ranchers and transition my husband's ranch from a cow-calf operation where the calves are sold at weaning age to eventually end up in a feedlot, to 100% grass-fed, grass-finished. So that is where I feel like is a big step for ranchers, is to transition to where you're raising and seeing all the animals all the way through. That's sort of the basic thing. Let's try to get as many animals out of confinement as possible and raise them on grass all the way. And it is possible.
Indeed. And you're doing this as a family farm. Can you talk a little bit about what that's like for you? And, this is something that it also goes back to farming culture. How is it these days for family farmers?
Well, there's not very many of us. So we were the first ones in our area to transition to 100% grass-fed. And what we're seeing now is those that have grass-fed ranches are owned by billionaires. So they don't necessarily need to make a living on the agriculture. It's just something, they bought a ranch and they want to try to do the right thing. So it's very difficult to sort of build your way up from the ground up as a family without having sort of outside investments, which is what we've done. We've just built from the ground up. And so we lease all of our land. We don't own the land. So we lease from regional parks, we lease from land trusts, we lease from private landowners. So it's a different feeling when you're investing in land that you don't really exactly know the future of. So that's a big challenge for us. But we feel like the work that we are doing, raising livestock in a way that mimics nature, that's good for the animals, and is producing large amounts of food to feed thousands of families, is definitely worth the challenges and worth sort of the hard work, because the benefits sort of outweigh those.
And are you homeschooling while you're doing all this in the middle of a pandemic and fires?
Yeah, well, we have 4 kids and they are all really integral to the ranch. And so it's actually been pretty nice for us to have them close to home. And here on the ranch, like during the fires, it was sort of a solid month of crisis. And I know many of the Western states experienced this. And I guess it was just our turn this year. We'd watched friends and other ranchers go through this in previous years. And so the fire hit us hard this year. And so our kids learned some valuable lessons of living through crisis and sort of stepping up and, really acting like adults. And they've been very integral. And yeah, we get a lot of support from our local teachers, but yeah, our kids are all at home right now.
And before we really delve deeply into your beef production and all of the really important pearls of wisdom that you have around this, can you share a little bit about the huge loss that you guys have experienced? I don't know if you feel comfortable sharing that, but I think it's important that all of us really connect with what exactly is going on for an awful lot of ranchers and farmers.
Yeah. So we spent a lot of time, because the fire was right up against our ranches. So we evacuated hundreds of animals. And we had one ranch that was sort of right on the edge of the evacuation zone. So we brought all the animals here, and we're hauling in water for them and feeding them. And so it was a huge sort of stress for us, mainly, of not getting much sleep. And while that was happening, there was, basically the fire just raging out of control. There was just so much fuel built up that had not been moved, had not been cleared or grazed in the nearby state parkland. And so we had, as I mentioned, we lease our land, and we had a personal property that we've invested for over 20 years, something that we could have helped pass down to our children. And we had a house there and barns, and it got completely burnt, a complete loss. And this was right in the same year, just earlier this year, all over California. Insurance companies are dropping properties that are in high risk areas. So we didn't have any fire insurance. So it was just a complete loss. So, we were dealing with all of this grief in the middle of trying to just, have the number one priority of saving lives. And so we didn't lose a single animal, which was our main goal.
Mm. And how are you doing now? This is a lot.
We're in another drought.
Yes.
California has not had rain. We don't see much rain on the forecast, and we just sort of say, okay, well, eventually, we're going to stop calling it drought and just say this is the new climate. We don't get much. Last year we got less than half of our average rainfall. So it's a tough time right now, and we're very busy just working to keep the animals moving onto good pasture where they have water. And we're sticking together. It's just nice to have the family and support from our community.
Wow. So, in just a moment, we'll be back. We're going to take a quick break, and Donika and Markegard will be right back. This is Heartstock. Thanks for listening. This is Heartstock Radio. I'm your host, Carol Murphy, and today we are speaking with Doniga Markegard. And let's talk now, Doniga, a little bit more about why what you're doing is so important. And climate change is real. Why? Let's see, how can I phrase this question? So there are some really beautiful, wonderful things that the land can do for us in regards to climate change. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So, and this goes back to that movie Kiss the Ground, which is a great movie to watch. It's currently on Netflix, but I believe it comes out on other platforms. And it might even be available on other platforms now. So basically the basis of the film is that we can draw down that legacy load of carbon through techniques of biosequestration. So growing more green living plants to pull carbon out of the atmosphere and store it long term in the soil. And it's sort of something that seems very simple and seems very common sense. But again, we don't see common sense isn't very common anymore. And as farmers and ranchers, we see that is the only solution we have for long-term sort of climate stability. Whether we can do it at a large enough scale, that's yet to be seen. So essentially, the way we've been farming, and we didn't learn this during the Dust Bowl, of tilling and applying chemicals and planting single crops is not working. It's not working for the planet. It's not working for the soil, for human health. And now we're seeing the results of this massive destruction of soil loss, and in the form of climate disasters, so fires and floods and hurricanes. And so how do we get to the point where we can start to see that carbon get drawn down? And the way that I like to look at it is through movement, that we can all relate to when we exercise and we move our bodies, that we feel really good. And it's the same with nature. So regenerative agriculture, as a rancher, we're out there, we're on horseback, we're moving our cattle. They're not standing in one place. They're not stagnant. And in turn, that moves the plants. And then when you move the plants, when those animals are grazing those plants, when they're fertilizing, when they're allowing that area to then regrow, and then that then moves the soil and moves the carbon down into the atmosphere. So stagnation on the flip side leads to oxidation and desertification. So we have a ranch, for example, that's been studied extensively, where we have a comparison of the ranch next door has had cattle removed, and sort of the motto of let it go back to nature. So what happens then is the grass plants don't have any disturbance. And so what they're doing is they're oxidizing, and they're actually releasing carbon into the atmosphere. Whereas the land where we're grazing our animals and we're moving the animals around, that's pulling down massive amounts of carbon. And so, we can look at that and say, okay, where can we start to bring that vigorous growth back in as much of the land surface as possible? And so animals are a great way to do that. Animals, they're sort of the ultimate biological farming unit, and they're solar powered, and they can be fed by grass, things that humans cannot eat. And you could use animals in conjunction with crops as well. Like we graze our flock of sheep on a nearby diversified organic market farm, and the sheep bring in the fertility and they graze the cover crop. So it's less passes with the tractor for the farmer. The sheep get to graze a great, diverse, productive crop, and the land gets fertilized, and he doesn't need to ship in compost from out of the area. So it's really a win-win. The separation of growing crops and livestock, it really has been devastating for the soil. We need that livestock to bring back that fertility and bring back the soil's ability to hold moisture and to hold carbon.
This is a little counter to what most people have been taught. So it's really heartwarming to see folks like you and all of the folks in Kiss the Ground working to re-educate us. I was lucky enough to have studied it in undergrad, so I knew that this was true. But there again, popular ideals, they just don't embrace this or know about it. So in many cases, that's the whole key here, right? With regenerative, the whole term regenerative is we can take land that has been ruined and bring it back to health just by changing the way that we manage it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you talk just a little bit more about this whole desertification issue that you spoke of earlier?
Yeah, so 40% of the land mass is covered in grassland, and that is in the threat of desertification. And so when desertification takes hold, basically you get bare soil, and when you have bare soil, then that soil, the moisture evaporates, you get more erosion, and it can't sustain life. So in order to reverse this desertification, well, you need to get life back to these areas. And so even like the example I was giving of the neighbor ranch that is not grazed, those plants, single species start to take over and dominate. And then what you see is bare ground all around it. So that's the start of desertification. And so what we can do in those areas is pretty simple. And we've seen this happen. We've seen land that pretty much only supported one or two species of grasses. And we bring our animals in, they trample all of that is sort of carbon that's standing in the air, not doing anything, and they get it in touch with the soil surface where all of that good stuff can happen. That's where all of those microbes live, is right on that soil surface is where there's so much life. And so then by mimicking the predator-prey relationship, so these grasslands evolved with predators moving large herds of animals across these grasslands. And so when we're moving those animals, it will stimulate more life. And within just one season, when those plants start to get trampled, and essentially what you're doing is you're making compost on site because you're mixing it with urine and dung, and it's composting right there and building healthy soils. And that brings in more light so that that seed bank can then diversify. We have 137 plant species on one ranch, and we've never planted a seed. And that diversity is increasing due to the grazing. So when we look at that, not just look at like, oh, cattle, good, bad, but we look at cattle when utilized as a tool for grassland health, and look at the science, we see that there are an incredible benefit to species and biodiversity. And that's why organizations like the Audubon Society are investing so much in their partnerships with grass-fed ranchers, because grassland birds are the group of birds that are the most threatened. And they see ranching as a way to bring those threatened species back to abundance. And we're actually seeing this on the ground. There's threatened species of grassland birds that are actually increasing in numbers on our ranches, whereas other areas, like say, that are used for cropland, much of the grasslands have been tilled under and used to plant corn or soy or other crops. The grassland birds are declining. So if we move away from tilled agriculture into regenerative agriculture, which integrates livestock, then it's not just going to be healthy for the soil, but healthy for all life.
I would really love it if we could talk a little more about your business model and how do you get your product to market?
Yeah, so as direct market ranchers, we sort of had to create everything from scratch, because there's not an easy way for ranchers just to plug in and say, okay, now I want to start selling direct. Well, you got to be able to finish the animals and take it to processing, and then work with your butcher, and then bring that package back, and then get that each individual package out to the end consumer. So because we're right here close to Silicon Valley and San Francisco, we primarily sell direct to families. And especially during this pandemic, that has been sort of a key benefit to our model, is that we are able to provide food security to local people, and they can trust that they will get a healthy product, and that they can depend on us for their protein source when they don't want to go to the grocery store, or they don't want to support industrial agriculture that's treating the animals and the people in a harmful way.
And in our last about half a minute here, how might folks find you? And is there any way that I could find farmers like you here locally in Montana or other places?
Yeah. Absolutely. Find your local farmer and do a search for local grass-fed ranchers in your area, and get to know your local farmer. And for me, you can find us on our website, markegardfamily.com.
Well, we wish you good luck and speedy recovery from all the impacts that you've experienced this year, along with everybody else. Oh my gosh, what a year.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being on Heartstock.
Thank you.
I'm your host, Carol Murphy. Clark Grant is in the studio, and we'll be back next week. This is Heartstock. Peace.
Heartstock Radio is a production of KBMF 102.5 Butte America Radio. Hear our live programs every Friday at 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time via livestream at butteamericaradio.org.
As I went walking, I saw a sign there, and on the sign it said, "No trespassing," but on the other side